Turmoil has engulfed the Galactic Republic. The taxation of trade routes to outlying star systems is in dispute. Hoping to resolve the matter with a blockade of deadly battleships, the greedy Trade Federation has stopped all shipping to the small planet of Naboo. While the Congress of the Republic endlessly debates this alarming chain of events, the Supreme Chancellor has secretly dispatched 2 Jedi Knights, the guardians of peace and justice in the galaxy, to settle the conflict. That's right, today we are starting our saga on a little-known film franchise called Star Wars. We'll be alternating Star Wars and Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time run-through for the remainder of the year. Hey, listen, and welcome to the ZeldaFilmcast. I'm your host, David Reese, in the show where we adventure across the realms of Hyrule and the Silver Screen. Welcome back, and we'll jump right into our random Zelda wiki article for the day. Today's article is the Floodgate Key. This is part of my Zelda blind spot, because this is a particular item in The Legend of Zelda Oracle of Seasons, which is a game I have not played. It is the key required to enter the Poison Moss lair in Oracle of Seasons. For this podcast, that might be a fun game to play through in the future. I can't really think of too many floodgate mechanics. The obvious one I think of is A Link to the Past. There's the Swamp Dungeon. You go into the past, open the floodgate, and you're able to get into the dungeon that way. But just like the swamps, you might find a Gungan, which is present in this movie series that we're starting. I alluded to it. We are doing Star Wars in rotation with Ocarina of Time Let's Play episodes. We will be covering the 9 Star Wars plus Rogue One, because I feel like it fits in there pretty well and was done better than some of the mainline Star Wars. And this is going to be fun. We'll bounce with Zelda movie news, Zelda game news, as we have been told that there's an Ocarina of Time remake coming up. It says 2026, but they said that about Tears of the Kingdom 2022, and then it came out in 2023. So the credibility from Nintendo to tell me Zelda dates, you never know. You can be optimistic. Depends on what kind of remake they're doing. Are they doing a full ground up remake? Well, we can talk about that later. Today, we're going to talk about Star Wars. We're going to go in series order. We're not going to go in order of release. So we're going to see, this is going to be light spoilers for Star Wars. I'm not going to plot by plot tell. I'll be elusive. I won't give big spoilers throughout the podcast. Just kind of overarching themes, like the first trilogy we're going to watch is the tragedy of Anakin, and then we're going to do the saga of Luke, and then the tale of Rey. Those are kind of the trilogies, the way they're set up. Plus, personally, I'm not a fan of starting a story in the middle and then having a 10 years earlier section, or this is something that happened before. I kind of like my stories start to finish, left to right. I don't like bouncing around timelines personally when it comes to big epics like Star Wars. So just like Star Wars starts their films in an iconic way, I borrowed that to start our podcast today with the screen crawl. Pretty cool. It's a little tradition they've been doing in all the Star Wars movies ever since the first one. Back when the first Star Wars movie was just Star Wars. No episode number, no subtitle, just straight up Star Wars. But now we have episode numbers and we have episode titles. First one we're talking about is The Phantom Menace. And you know what every good Star Wars story needs? a dispute over taxation of trade routes. Man, when I think Star Wars, I always think about economic consequences that might occur. And I hope that my trade routes aren't taxed. I mean, wouldn't that be a bummer if, you're trading in outer space and then all of a sudden the Empire starts wanting to wet their beak, wanting to get a little, just sticking their hand out, just wanting a little slice of the pie. Well, that's how we start. There's going to be a 10 movie Star Wars saga. And we are starting with a trade federation that is upset about some taxes. So what do? They take their little trade federation army and all their trade federation spaceships and droids and late 90s costumes, and they're going to blockade an entire planet to really show it to the Galactic Republic, because that's our government at this point. The galaxy has a republic, a coalition of other planets of sorts, and they all get to kind of bicker in Congress. Isn't that a good way that we start our saga? We see a young Natalie Portman. She's in a bunch of makeup. I guess you could make a Zelda parallel. They start with something small. I mean, it's not necessarily 1-to-1, but the stakes right now are just trade, taxes, and political intrigue, and the big, good versus evil stuff hasn't began yet. And that's kind of the way Zelda games start, especially like Ocarina of Time, for example. You start the game small. You're running chores, errands, go get a sword, go get a shield. And then later on in the game, especially after that third dungeon, stuff gets cranked into high gear, which is kind of a good natural escalation of a story. You don't want to start with everything super high stakes and right off the bat without any room to grow or anywhere to explore. So if you naturally start smaller scale, and I mean, you're also needing the table set as well. You're trying that there's a whole cast of characters. There's a whole sci-fi galaxy where the rules are unknown. You as the viewer, you don't know what's what. You don't know who's on what sides there are. It's Star Wars. This is intended for general and broad audiences, so it's not super convoluted and deep unless you want to go through other material that accompanies the movies. I know there's been books that have since been, they were canon, but then with the Disney acquisition of Lucasfilm, they became non-canon. But I know there's a lot of extra media if you really want to get deep into the lore. Star Wars, you can really dig into it. There's a whole TV show, The Clone Wars, that we're not even going to cover, that has a bunch of lore and basically covers the events between two movies at this point. But as you watch the movies, they're pretty digestible, pretty straightforward to follow, which kind of helps broaden the appeal to the general viewer. So we talked about taxes. Of the Congress, there's a Supreme Chancellor, and he sends two peacekeepers, essentially. They're not police officers in a way. They are Jedi Knights. They are a part of almost a religious order, but they're a special order of Jedi who practice and coexist with the Force, and they use the Force and they use lightsabers to kind of help enforce peace and justice in the galaxy and to try to promote good as well. So that's who the Supreme Chancellor decides to send to the blockade to kind of talk these trade guys into being cool about it, not being jerks and deciding to take an entire planet hostage. Essentially, we get some cool shots on the ship where when the Trade Federation finds out, oh no, we got Jedi on board. We did not sign up for that. Let's attack them with some droids, and we're also gonna commence an assault on the planet. It's kind of fun to see the Jedis run through the ships and just slicing up droids. It's a fun character trope that happens in a lot of fantasy fiction media. I think I've talked about it on the show before, but essentially having a faceless army that your main character can kind of just plow through and you don't really feel bad for the bad guys. In this movie, we have these generic battle droids, these Roger kind of guys that are real flimsy and don't stand any chance against a ray gun or a lightsaber, and they're just chopped throughout the movie. Essentially, they're no threat, and that's the way I kind of think of Link with Bokoblins. Whether it's your Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, or even other games like Twilight Princess, they're just kind of there randomly scattered, and they're a minor obstacle to get in the way. They're not a big boss or a big enemy that's going to require planning and carefully executed maneuvers. They're cannon fodder. They're meant to be disposable. You don't grow an attachment to them, and they're just gone. The battle droids have kind of become, they're not synonymous with Star Wars. Some franchises, the faceless army kind of gets associated with the franchise. Star Wars, it would be the stormtroopers. They're more recognizable. You see stormtroopers, you're like, okay, those are the faceless people army from Star Wars that the Jedi and the rebels blow up and they fight through. Though it's interesting, in some of the more recent stuff, the stormtroopers have more of a personality or character to them. And we'll talk about that when we get to that. Stay focused on Phantom Menace, where we have our boy Jar Jar Binks, fully CGI character in an age where the CGI is okay. Watching this again in 2026, it's not bad, but you can tell it's a product of its time. There are some pretty good visuals. I will give them that. The Federation launches their trade assault. They come across the Jedi, sneak down to the planet. They come across our friend Jar Jar, who is the comedic relief character. He talks funny. He's not that smart. He's there to kind of fluff the entertainment factor. That way it's not just such a gritty tale about taxes and fighting and politics. That way we can have some relief in the sequences. Like right now, as I'm recording, they're being chased by a giant fish. And we get the iconic lines from Liam Neeson, who portrays Qui-Gon Jinn. There's always a bigger fish. Fun fact, Jar Jar was the first fully CGI supporting character in a live-action blockbuster. You could make another Zelda comparison. You could basically see he's kind of like Tingle. He's the very divisive, goofy character that's almost there for comic relief. I know Tingle's kind of an offshot, and he's not in that many stuff, but boy is he divisive, just like Jar Jar. A lot of the Star Wars people do not like Jar Jar. We get our introduction to R2-D2. He's just a ship repairman, and little do we know, he's around to stay. He's going to be following our adventure. So they get the princess, they get her servants. They'll come. That's the Chekhov's gun for later in the movie. And they do a blockade run, and they get out of they basically breach the blockade, and they get a little detour on their way to the Congress. We get our Tatooine sequence. The Tatooine sequence has story purpose and is also, hey, check out how cool this world is. We got pod racing. Yeah, space isn't always cool. There's space slavery. We meet this cool kid who can build droids and robots. And he's also a pod racer. Kid is portrayed by Jake Lloyd, who was a child actor. He's an adult now, I believe, and he has left the field of acting. He was the kid in an old Arnold Schwarzenegger Christmas movie called Jingle All the Way that features the Mall of America. As someone in the Midwest has been there, kind of nice to see representation in media in the middle of all our cornfields and cow pastures. But Anakin, we meet Anakin, little kid. He's supposed to be 11, I think. And we meet his mom, their owner, Waddle, some scummy space alien business owner. He can't refuse a good gamble. He's a gambler, and he does a gamble with our good friends, Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Long story short, they gamble the race on Annie. So Anakin and Annie comes out victorious despite Salboba's pettiness and trying to sabotage his pod. I guess the sad part is only Anakin was part of the deal. So he had to leave his mom. Shmi stayed with Watto on Tatooine while Anakin went with the Jedi Knights, a princess princess or queen, Amidala, going to Coruscant, the galaxy's capital, and she just has to remain her life as a slave. Kind of rings true when Yoda and the council they're assessing Anakin over his midichlorian count. And that's something that hasn't been introduced yet, except if you have a high midichlorian count, you tend to be more focused or in tuned with the Force. So I guess they did a quick test, and this kid is special and is taken away to become a Jedi Knight. But he's still just a kid, and there's also the fear and feelings of leaving his mom behind on Tatooine. As a side note, his mom's named Shmi or Smee. I always think of Captain Hook's right-hand man. That's right, we're looping all the way back to one of our earliest episodes of the podcast that I don't recommend you listen to, Peter Pan. Captain Hook's right-hand man, Shmi, Anakin Skywalker's mother, Shmi. Coincidence? I think not. They might be related. I guess relatives don't typically have the same name, especially one's male and one's female. But I thought that's a fun coincidence. It's a fun movie. So we have Darth Maul making an appearance, gives them the spooks while they're leaving Tatooine. And then we get to go to Coruscant, the galactic capital. Just like a lot of planets in Star Wars, the entire planet is one type of biome, which is city. The whole planet is a giant city, and we meet Chancellor Valorum, and we meet Senator Palpatine. Palpatine is the senator for Naboo, and Naboo is having this Trade Federation struggle, and he has a plan. His plan is basically to get the Queen of Naboo, Amidala, to get a vote of no confidence in the Chancellor so he can become the Chancellor. I don't know what the qualifications are in order to call that vote, but that seems like a pretty powerful thing to call. As I'm watching this again, I'm like, so anyone can just call for a vote of no confidence and then everyone has to vote on a new chancellor? Like, is there a bar or a threshold it has to pass? I don't know. Could you imagine that in the world today? If the Congress could just have a vote of no confidence and then they'd have to elect a new president? I guess it's a little different the way they're set up versus how Star Wars is. Or Star Wars is set up a little different than our government or governments of the world. But no, this second half of the movie kind of drags on. Lots of politics. It's a long movie. In total, it's 217, and it feels longer to me. It has a strong start, in the pod racing, but after the Tatooine sequence in the pod racing, it kind of grinds to a halt for me. All the Coruscant stuff, the Jedi Council meeting with Anakin, sensing his fear, CGI Yoda. I don't know. The midichlorian discussion he has, I don't know. It's not the best. We kind of get a hoorah moment when they return back to Naboo. The Gungans and the Nabooians kind of reuniting to fight the Trade Federation. Then we have kind of a four-way epic way that we're going to close out the movie. We have the Duel of the Fates, which is probably my favorite. Just the music alone and the choreography with the lightsaber battle between Darth Maul, Qui-Gon, and Obi-Wan. And with Qui-Gon dying, that kind of seals Anakin's future. The Gungan battle, didn't really care. That's a crowd pleaser. Some comic relief, some slapstick. The blue energy tanks were kind of cool. Palace infiltration, when Padme sneaks into the palace, that's that's okay. The throne room shootout, and then Anakin flying a spaceship, saying now this is pod racing. I mean, it's a happy ending. This was a big blockbuster, and you want the ending to be a feel-good celebration. Yes, Qui-Gon passes away, but with the death of one Jedi, we have the potential of an even greater Jedi in Anakin. There's so much we could go over, but that's not my style. I mean, there's other podcasts that go deep into the lore, and as a Zelda fan, Star Wars is pretty cool, and it has elements that Zelda doesn't have, namely sci-fi, basically. Zelda's pretty much fantasy, and they venture into sci-fi, I'd say, probably the most recent with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Yes, they're masking it as Sheikah and ancient Zonai stuff, but it's really just magic stuff, or it's really just like a magic system or science fiction system, I guess, where they don't really explain how it works, but it also messes with the physics in the world. So that's really interesting. We have the hero's journey echoes through Star Wars the same way it echoes through the Zelda games. Politics isn't quite as much of a factor. Swordplay definitely is a factor. There's a lot. There's the shadow of the Sith. There's always the shadow of, is Ganon gone for good this time? I'm excited to talk more. There's some points I'll elaborate on and get out. I haven't released an episode in a while. Being a first-time parent, boy, is that a time commitment. Hard to have creative juices when you're in the trenches. But I'm excited. I want to get back into this. Until I'm caught up on the schedule, I really want to try one a week until we're all caught up. By Christmas time, we're wrapping up the last Star Wars, and we're finishing Ocarina of Time. Hopefully in time for the Ocarina of Time remake. I want to talk about some stuff. Send me messages on X at ZeldaFilmcast or email me at ZeldaFilmcast@gmail.com. There's a handy dandy send a message link in the show notes. And that's going to be it for this episode. If you like what you heard, leave us a review. Thanks for listening. And as always, may the Triforce be with you.